Mari Urbina joins me now. She's the National Policy Director for Indivisible. I want to talk about a couple of the candidates and some interesting issues out there too. Mari, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm rock and roll. So let's talk Elizabeth Warren, Warren. I hope not. Warren, Beto O'Rourke, and then I want to talk about their staff too. Some of the staff of the candidates. So sure. Elizabeth Warren. A turn for the positive is the sense I'm getting from you based on what I've read. What do you think was going wrong with Elizabeth Warren's campaign before, and what do you think she has addressed in a positive way now?
Great, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you caught her CNN town hall just the other night, but it was really remarkable. You can tell that she's had countless town halls and it really shows. And I think it's a great model for other candidates to make sure that they're talking to the grassroots, they're talking to people directly without having just the highest bidders in their vicinity. And so she really, I think she really did a remarkable job explaining her policy positions, explaining her vision, and making sure that she's being race forward, that she's being inclusive, that she's unafraid to take bold stances that are going to really resonate with folks all across the country, but specifically, in building a multiracial coalition of base voters. So really impressed with her arc overall, and really impressed that she's leaning into issues across the board for the base.
You know, Mari, as you were talking, we were running a picture where Elizabeth Warren was speaking and Ayanna Pressley was in the background. I don't know if that was before Ayanna won or after she won, but it's kind of a cool thing to see that. Obviously, they're both from Massachusetts. Anyway, so
love Ayanna and her leadership. And just to plug her, I mean, we endorsed her last cycle, and I just quickly to say that I think some of these historic women, especially historic women of color who ran last cycle, really reshaped what we understand to be close to pain and then close to power. And Ayanna talks a lot about that. And I think that has made it so that this field of presidential candidates can come in and be their full self, be fully a person of color, be fully a woman, be fully an LGBTQ person in this moment, and be considered competitive and dynamic. And so I think we have to thank, the Stacey Abrams, Ayanna Presley's, Andrew Gillum's of the 2018 cycle for giving us this vision for what can be politically possible.
Ooh, I love that saying. I hadn't heard that before. From pain to power.
Ayanna Presley says it a lot, so it's all kudos to her.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, I'm not saying I told you, but Ayanna Pressley, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, all just Democrats. And I said Elizabeth Warren's a real progressive, and it took a while for people to get there, and sometimes it took a while for her to get there. But she's, on so many issues, she's not just a progressive, but she's leading. Right. And it's really important to have a leader like that out there. Okay, so now, on the other hand, let's turn to Beto. So I don't want to prejudge what you're going to say, and I'm not sure what you're going to say. So what's your latest take on Beto O'Rourke?
Well, Beto still has his case to make to voters, to the community, to activists. He has to be really clear-eyed and specific about what he intends to do. I think everyone saw the rollout, and though there is real enthusiasm that you can tell by his fundraising numbers, his grassroots fundraising numbers, you can credit him for doing a really good job around PAC, taking money from PACs, rejecting money from PACs, rejecting corporate PAC money, and really leaning into talking to everyone and making the case to everyone. But I think it really matters what he's going to say specifically. I think that one thing, folks credit him for being able to talk about immigration squarely. And I think it's great that he's not afraid to talk about immigration the way that many Democrats have been in the past. But I also think Julian Castro can, the press and activists and folks who are following this race closely already should also be lifting up the ways that other candidates who might not have, the privilege or the bias to be deemed viable just by, walking out of their house, that they also be considered and measured with the same level of excitement and scrutiny.
So are there policy positions he has that concern you?
Well, I think that as he articulates them, we'll want to hear what he has to say. I think when you look at his record in the Congress and you look at how he ran, there's a lot of excitement there, and there's a lot that he can draw on uniting people from, and that's a good thing. And again, I think that the case that he makes around just talking to folks everywhere and and speaking to sort of, what draws us together and speaking to immigration issues, I think is really exciting. Beyond that, though, I think he still has a lot to be specific about. And I think, your viewers and our movement and grassroots movements across the country should be really eager to hear from him.
Yeah, we definitely are. I mean, the last guest I talked to, Alex Lawson from Social Security Works, pointed out, I mean, he was for Medicare for all and then he wasn't. So that you're absolutely right. He's got to at least clarify. Like what,
right.
So what's your position and why did you change your position? Was there something that prompted you to change your position?
Right.
Those are really important questions.
Absolutely. And I think folks should be, I think it's the whole package, right? I think especially if you've served already in public office, it's both your record and your past, but also what you intend to do in the future once you're governing. And I think that both should be measured. I don't think that, folks will just kind of turn away from people's record, but certainly if you're able to animate folks and explain your strategic and political arc, that voters will react well to it, but they need to believe you. And so it has to be compelling. It has to be consistent and authentic throughout the cycle. And the only way to do that is to face the voters and be really clear.
Yep. All right, so let's go on to their staffers, because that doesn't get a lot of attention. Today, it was finally in the news a little bit based on the staffers that Bernie Sanders announced, and we covered it, and other outlets did too. But I want to get your sense holistically of the whole field. What's your sense of how they're doing in hiring staffers?
Well, it's certainly historic, I think, across the field, right? When you look at the number of staffers of color, of women of color, of other people across lines of difference in identity, you're seeing a real representation that's exciting. But it cannot just stop there, right? I think we've all had really important conversations about tokenism and visibility that I'm so happy we're finally having them, that we're having them out loud, and that we're centering. Again, like we can go back to that Ayanna Pressley quote, which is those closest, those in proximity to pain should be those in proximity to power. And if we're really committed to having fuller strategies, and we're really committed to having campaigns that not just reflect our communities, but that are disrupting power so that we are sharing power, so that our government and our democracy eventually looks like its people, then we have to be really ready to not just say congratulations for having such a diverse senior leadership staff, but how are you creating real positions of power and leadership and budget and authority making as staff is unveiled. And I think so far what we're seeing is all very exciting, and I'm really happy to look around at the field of staff. I think it makes a tremendous difference when people can come in, not just along lines of racial or ethnic or gender difference, but also folks who are coming in from the movement, who are not just like sort of your longtime campaigners who have been picked time and time again. And I think that's an exciting shift. I think Maya Rupert, the head of Castro's campaign, is a really exciting manager who comes from the movement, who is a Black woman, who is new into this campaign space. And I think pushing him in ways that have so far been really dynamic and really authentic, and gives some dimension to these candidates too. When you have staff who are unafraid to push you and to ask the most from you, and you have staff who can do that in a race forward way with several levels of dimension, your strategy is going to be fuller, and voters are going to react to that. And so far, I think we're seeing really positive developments.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Brianna Joy Gray hire for Bernie Sanders among so many others.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and look, finally, Klobuchar gets to yell at minority staffers just like she did for white staffers. So in that case, it's from pain to pain. I'm just playing. I'm playing.
You're funny.
Okay. I don't know if that's a fair criticism of Klobuchar, but it was an easy joke. Okay.
Well, I think that another welcome topic, I think, this cycle is that any space that is unsafe for anyone, whether it be along lines of discrimination, harassment, gender, race and class, right? Like, we have to be committed to creating safe spaces for people to work from and thrive. And so I think that it's really important that we're talking about campaign staff that are not just diverse, but that they're safe to organize, that they feel really rooted in their power, and that they can thrive, and that they don't have to be concerned with sort of the politics of past, which is just be loyal, don't say anything, and just kind of suffer through it. And so I think, I know you're joking, but I think it's a really good thing that we're having discussions about what a safe and thriving workplace looks like for everyone.
So Mari, that's actually a great point, because it's not the yelling so much as it is this a cooperative place? Is this a place where we're all learning together? And I'm getting feedback from my staff, especially if I've hired a diverse staff, if I'm not listening to them, it doesn't do me much good, right? And so I think in that sense, it is a real issue for Senator Klobuchar's. All right, time for just one last thing. I know that some of the candidates are now talking about reparations, et cetera. I wanted to introduce the idea of baby bonds to some people that haven't heard of it. Can you just quickly, Mari, tell us what that is?
Yeah, great. And so I have to actually distinguish myself a little from my colleague Angel Padilla, who is our policy director. I'm our political director. So I'm going to give you the top line, but the top line is that Senator Booker has introduced an answer to the growing racial wealth gap, and that is that kids of color specifically are growing into continued cycles of poverty because of the systems we've created, because of the policies we've passed, because of the real ways that we've excluded largely the descendants of slaves, but all Black people and people of color in this country in a way that has had devastating effects and continues to maintain wealth closely tied to whiteness. And so I think it is important that as we talk about real economic reforms, and that you're seeing this whole field come out with great ideas, and not just sort of like the CTC here and the EITC there. You're seeing folks engage with a new framework, and that's a good thing. And I think that's where the baby bonds comes in. Senator Booker, who's looking at establishing essentially savings accounts for every child born in America, and then the levels are set differently depending on your family situation. And so I think that's a real thing. The other thing that's important about the baby bonds, and I think for any 2020 candidate, is that you need to name that some of these proposals are solving problems that are meant to be targeted. They're solving problems that are meant to say there have been injustices, there have been stains in our history, and this proposal is not just sort of this is going to help solve the problem for everyone, because we've seen when universal programs have squarely left people out, largely people of color and Black Americans specifically. And so it is good also that we're seeing candidates not just run on big ideas, but name the ways in which we have had a real stain in our history, and name the ways in which we're going to be honest about how we're going to solve for them.
Yeah, and look, all of this race is so exciting because there's so many different candidates that are great on different issues, and Cory Booker is also a giant on criminal justice reform.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right, Mari Urbina with Indivisible, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Placer.